Ladies and gentlemen, this is a disclaimer that the content you are about to listen to could contain traumatic or emotional stories. If this brings up any emotions or traumatic events that you've experienced, please seek appropriate services if needed. As always, it is important that we remember that the guests are here to share with all of us, and we need to be empathetic and supportive to foster a community where individuals feel safe to share these types of stories. If you have an individual you would like to see on the show, please make sure to comment below, and I will see if they're interested. If you are someone interested in being on the show, please reach out and let's make it happen. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Dives into the Minds of Esports. My name is Blake Panashevitz, and today I am followed by a wonderful guest, Jake Lyon, on Houston Outlaws turned amazing caster. He can do pretty much everything. I'm going to say it. I think that he is probably one of the faces for Overwatch, if not esports in general. I think that, Jake, you're an amazing person. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to be here, talk about some things that we don't always get the chance to talk about.
Yeah, and I think really easily, starting it off, you are 23 years old?
22 now.
Oh, 22. I was close. So yeah. One of the things that I noticed is that you are a Scotch drinker.
Yeah, I don't know if I can put myself in that class, in that categorization, but I do sometimes partake of the.
You're of the legal age, and I am not condoning underage drinking at all. I will say that.
Only, of course, for those of you legal age.
Yes. I saw it one time in one of your videos. You got Scotch as a gift, and you seemed really happy. Do you actually drink? Because I'm getting into whiskey a little bit here and Scotch. So
a little bit. I'm still mostly a novice, but it was great to get that gift from Cool Matt for our Secret Santa. It was very Cool Matt of him.
Okay, so when you say
half of it was the gift itself. The other half was that I got it from Cool Matt, which made me really happy that he was my Secret Santa. I don't know why, but.
So looking at Scotch, like when you say you're a beginner Scotch, are you talking like starting out with like what was the first Scotch that you drank that was like, hey, I want to get into this?
I don't know if I ever really had the moment of like wanting to get into this. I've just had the opportunity to drink fine Scotch like more times than I should have in my life, given that I don't really know anything about it. So I've kind of trial by fire been he was like, here, try this. So it's been other people, more experienced people that have shown me what I'm missing, I guess. And I've kind of learned to enjoy it. You know, that was the weird thing I never expected. I kind of was always like, yeah, whatever. Okay, I'll have some, sure, if you say it's nice. But then starting to enjoy it was something I didn't really expect. But, you know, hey, now I'm here.
It's very interesting.
I still don't drink very much. I still drink maybe once in a great while. So
yeah, I'll have a like one drink, and when I say one drink, I mean like an ounce over like some ice because I'm weak, and I really like it a little bit watered down. But that's something that I started to get into recently because I was doing keto diet, and so you can only drink like liquor straight. So I was like, I better learn how to drink something that is actually supposedly delicious. It took a while to kind of get into that. So I think people have started to kind of associate you as the face of. I mean, you went to the Olympics. You spoke. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think it's kind of funny, but like from my perspective, all I do is I just like it's just kind of like my strategy for my career and everything is just to say yes to everything and to like work as hard as I can, especially in the off season when there's not as much to do for like the player career. Then there's a lot of opportunities to expand yourself and to kind of fill other things in your life and do other interesting stuff. Like I'm still going to play next season and I'm still, really psyched about that and really want to like get back to the grind and start practicing, which I've already started to do. But it was cool during the off season to kind of like, I was like, well, why not say yes to all these cool opportunities, to go to the Youth Olympics and represent esports at the Olympism in Action Forum and then the esports forum as well, and then also to like these things that people say I guess are making me the face of Overwatch. I mean, it's kind of hard to ever accept something like that, so you just kind of like I don't know, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I guess the things that I've chosen to do have put me like more in the public eye, which is kind of surprising because when I think about it, that's never what I was considering when I said yes. It was always like, wow, this is such a amazing opportunity, like a once in a lifetime opportunity I felt for each of these things that I've done, with the casting or with the International Olympic Committee. So I just kind of was like, this opportunity came up. I was like, of course, I'll seize that opportunity and do my best on it. And just like, work as hard as I can to be successful in that. So whether that was casting or being a representative to the IOC. And then I guess, I don't know, I never really thought about like the grand picture of things. So for my experience, it was really just that philosophy of saying yes to every opportunity and trying to work really hard.
Have you always been like that, where you're like, I'm just going to say yes to this, I'm going to just go out and do it? Because that's, I would say that is very different from a lot of people who are involved in gaming, just in like the people that I've met and the people I've talked to. I would say that is not a normal thing that I've seen a lot of the times.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it really comes from my parents, honestly, and I really thank them for that, because maybe my mom especially, because my mom is definitely the business person of the family. You know, she and my dad have a company together. They work together.
You said they work in the film industry, right?
Yeah, yeah. So they work in video production. So they make basically commercials, and right now their main clients are biotechnology, and technology in general, but biotech especially because they're based in San Diego, where there's a lot of biotech development right about now. But basically, I think what I learned from them, even though they were never supportive really of gaming, I kind of had to learn in order, because I really like gaming, in order for them to let me game, I had to have everything else in my life, you know, handled under control, so they wouldn't, you know, stop me basically. So I had to have, you know, good grades in school and be doing other extracurriculars and have a sport and whatever. So I had to check all these boxes for them. But I think what that taught me was that, you know, that if you want to get something in life, you have to be willing to work really hard for it. And then once I had the opportunity to be in esports, I was like, I'm not gonna miss any opportunity that could bring me even further, considering how lucky I am to be in this place.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, because a lot of times, so looking at like growing up and you being involved in all these different things, a lot of times gamers have issues with social situations. Was that ever an issue with you?
I mean, I would say so. Like in high school, I was pretty shy and reserved, but luckily I got to do 3 years of college before I left for the Overwatch League. But I'm really happy about my time at Denison University, because I think that really brought me out of my shell. I like made more friends than I did in high school, and I was kind of, even though I was still gaming a lot, because of the freedom that college allows you and just the environment being so different than high school, I felt kind of more at home and more able to make friends and find people of similar interests to myself. So I feel like college really helped me in that regard to be more ready for these, I would say, social opportunities. You know, like representing esports to the IOC is really, by and large, a social opportunity where you have to like go meet all these different people and tell them, here's what I do, and you know, here's what my industry is, and here's, you know, what I think about it, and really yada yada. But it's really just a lot of talking and getting to know people and connecting, and that was what, for instance, the esports forum was explicitly about, was really just start the conversation, get people talking about esports and about the Olympics, and see, is there room for some overlap here. And really, I think all those things are connected, right? Like that experience of improving myself in those ways, right? Being less shy, less afraid to speak my mind, that I think I got really from college.
Mm-hmm. What you mentioned that you were more shy in high school. What was that like for you? What did that look like? Because I think a lot of people, especially in high school nowadays, we've seen different trends or different things where they have a lot of hard time. What did that look like for you?
I don't know. I just always wanted to play games, and that was like my focus. I just love gaming, and it wasn't, at the time that I was at high school, it wasn't like socially acceptable, I guess. Not that, I don't know, I'm like some nerd getting pushed into a locker, right? It wasn't like that extreme, but I didn't feel like there were that many people at high school who kind of had my same interests, who you know, who really wanted to play video games the same way that I did. Like I don't think anybody else at the school was. Even though I went to a really big high school, so there were some people who were into gaming and people who were into really everything, because the high school was so big. So I did have some, you know, groups of friends and everything, but I think people have this image of me where I'm like the for lack of a better word, the Chad, like some popular guy at high
I think
school.
that is definitely
But I don't know. I really wasn't. I was just like, you know, I was that kid who just maybe talk too much in class. That was like the one time I was like not shy anymore in school, was class, really, because I always felt like if there was, my personality is I'm introverted, but if there's something to talk about that I'm really interested in or engaged about, then I can talk all day. So that's why, like, when I get on a cast, I don't feel shy at all, because I'm just like, talking about the game, and that my whole focus is just like on this thing, and me and my co-caster, me and ZP are just talking about the game, and that's when I don't feel any sort of shyness or introversion. But I would say outside of those settings where there's not such a specific focus of what you're doing, where you're just, hanging out or something, then I'd be pretty shy and introverted. And that was the time when I really just wanted to, play games by myself. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that made me, I mean, I don't want to say outcast, because I don't feel like that accurately describes my high school experience, but I was definitely not, I don't know, not one of the popular. I think I knew about half of the people who I graduated with.
What was your
graduating class? Was like 900, almost 800.
That's huge.
But, yeah, it's a big high school, so it was a little bit different. I think just the size of that high school is like very different than what most people experience. But yeah, I mean, I just didn't really enjoy high school. Maybe it was the long and the short of it. Like by senior year, most of my friends had already graduated, and I was kind of over it. So high school for me was kind of, I think for a lot of people, it's not really the most fulfilling time of their life.
Now, you seem to be someone who knows and seems to be you either fake it really well, or I think that you're incredibly intelligent and you keep up on a lot of different things. So I'm not sure which one it is. Do you keep up with like the school systems and stuff like that? Because that was something that, like the way that schools are run. Because I remember you writing an article on like learning in Overwatch. Is that something that is like an interest to you, like the way that we run our school systems, or the way that we handle different things, the way that we learn as individuals?
Well, I definitely think the way schooling is done is super important, like all the logistical nature of it, but more than that, really, I think it comes down to the classroom in a big way. Mm-hmm. Like if I think back to high school, and I think what I'm really thankful for, it's those teachers that like really made a difference in my life and impacted my life. I had like a few teachers that stand out to me as just, being life-changing really, and showing either giving me some idea, or some their way of teaching was so engaging and like kind of drew the students in rather than trying to put out information to them. Encouraging students to learn as part of the course rather than making the course like the distribution of knowledge to students. I felt like that was super impactful to me. I had a writing teacher in high school who I still kind of feel like was perhaps my best writing teacher ever. Just in terms of, even though I went through like a full, 400 level economics course load in college, a full 400 level philosophy course load, so a ton of writing. At least in my school, even economics was relatively writing intensive. Of course, philosophy is super writing intensive as a major, but I still feel like this high school teacher I had kind of really opened my eyes to writing and to how to express yourself and really how to think about when you go to write a practical, piece of work, right, where you're discussing something specific, whether that's a book or an event, a historical event, or a modern event, or you're writing like a white paper or policy paper, anything like that, anything you write with a purpose. How do you approach that purpose, and how do you give that to the reader without just saying it to them, and how do you, express that most effectively in writing? I feel like that Miss Allen, shout out. I don't think she's ever gonna see this, but yeah, that was definitely life changing for me. That I think one thing she said was the mark of an educated person is the ability to entertain an idea without accepting it, which I've still kind of followed through as being one of the most important things in my life today. Is just being able to entertain different perspectives, even if you think offhand that they're just radically false and there's no redeeming characteristics. You should still entertain them. Like consider why someone might think that. That's super important, I think, especially in today's culture where it's very easy to say, like, look, some positions in the political spectrum I do feel the same way about, where I'm like, how can anyone think that? That's so wrong, But at the same time, it doesn't benefit anybody to just go that way and be like, you're stupid, you're wrong, I don't want to talk to you. If you actually take the moment to be like, well, why do they feel that way? Even though we disagree, and I'm not going to agree with that end conclusion, why do people feel that way? And starting to understand, I think, why other people feel the way they do and why they have the ideas they have is like the most important thing that you can do in life when it comes to being open and to bettering yourself, is just being open to other people's perspectives and even if you end up staying the same and you still don't agree with them, you might learn something from them, despite their positions being so different.
Yeah, I think it's really important to actually be open to. I think a lot of more people are being closed off to things. Like they say that they're very open, but they're very open to the ideas that they already agree with a lot of times. I think that Reddit is a huge example of very a closed-minded thinking a lot of time where it shifts one way or another very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
yeah, go ahead.
the challenge of Reddit is just that it's by its nature, it's like snowball-y in the sense that if you I believe if you comment like really fast when a thread is posted, that becomes like a large thread. Like if your comment is one of the younger comments or the older comments, I guess I should say, on the thread, then the odds of you being highly upvoted are just radically higher. So if you think about that, that means that there's a degree of randomness of like who sees these unpopular threads first and comments first is radically likely to be the top upvoted comment, which is basically thought of as the expression of all Reddit of like on this topic of the thread is like, what's the top voted comment? What are like the top, whatever, X voted comments? Those are the ones that are like, oh, well, this is what people think because it's upvoted. But I mean, of course, there were a large number of people that agreed with that sentiment or wanted to upvote that sentiment. But at the same time, you have to factor in the randomness of that sentiment being there first to be upvoted. And I think that's not something that you can really comprehend in terms of like, you can't think about, well, what if someone posted something else early? You just don't know. And that's I think the problem with Reddit in terms of expressing a sentiment of a community is that there's a high degree of randomness based on who comments first, or relatively early into the thread cycle. So you get these upvoted opinions that it might be popular, but maybe there's other opinions that are also popular that would be more nuanced, but more difficult. And also nuanced opinions in general are just more difficult to get traction on Reddit.
Yeah, I think the most recent thing that I saw was the idea of like a players union. And I think in theory, a players union sounds amazing, and I would like to see one in theory. But I think that the actual implementation of a players union sounds incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think a players union would be a good thing. And to be fair, Overwatch League is probably in the best position to have a players union of all esports, just because there's so much structure and security in the contracts. Maybe, I don't know exactly what League of Legends contracts look like, but I imagine with their franchise league, there's probably that similar level of structure. So maybe they could achieve a similar thing.
Well, I mean, they supposedly have one. I don't know how good it is.
Yeah,
I've heard stories.
I don't know, man. But we should probably. I mean, the only problem with esports unions is that there's no way. In my mind, it's ridiculous to have a union that spans every game to like all esports players. It's just the people's financial and career situations are so radically different in other competitive titles than they are in, like A competitive title A versus B, like Overwatch to League of Legends to Overwatch to Team Fortress 2 or whatever. Like there's esports in every game, but some games there's just no money to be made, so you can't have a union because there's nothing to fight over, or there's no one to bargain with, right? And just you can't just like pick this game's big enough, this game's not big enough, because there's no clear line, I think, there, where there's some games like Fortnite and PUBG where they're really big and they're really popular, but like who do you really negotiate with on the union end? Because every org is like totally separate. There's no unifying body like the Overwatch League is a unifying body, and like the LCS is a unifying body. So you kind of need that, I think, to give a sort of scope to the union. But right now in the Overwatch League, it's pretty hard to like get people mad and wanting to unionize, because they are, to be fair, treating us very well compared to anyone who's played, arena shooters before Overwatch. This is like 100 times better than anything that's been in the past. So it's hard to sort of get that initial, like, we want this, so we're going to make a union for it.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably not the right mindset. We probably should just make a union just so we can sit at the table and be part of these meetings. But the challenge is who's going to do it. Because
who's going to pay for it? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge opportunity for malfeasance, and like you need somebody who's running the union who really cares about the players and really like wants to fight for their best interests. And it's not clear how much responsibility that is. It's definitely a current player will not do that because it's like too much responsibility. But if it's not a current player, who is it? I do think we have some power just because a lot of the agents in the community that represent players represent like enough players to where you can't just like, shit on one player and like just screw them over, because you know, the agent has enough like the agents are the agglomeration of negotiating power, right? Of bargaining power. You can't just say, well, I mean, you can abuse players, right, to some extent, but to the extent that a union would really stop you is, I don't know that, I don't know what we would ask for first, right? Like, I don't know what that key issue would be that we really need to unionize over. And I think that it'll probably be a key issue that people feel really strongly about. A lot of people feel strongly about, but that isn't being resolved. But right now, it feels like Blizzard is really resolving like most people's concerns. We're talking about, hey, we have this concern. Can you change this for us? And they've been very open-minded about it. So I think there's a lot of feeling on the player side, at least for me. It's like, well, Blizzard's taking care of us pretty well right now.
That's kind of one of the things I was thinking about is instead of a players union, it seems like Blizzard has been able to take more of an approach to actually fix a lot of the issues here, and that instead of having a players union, it might just be Blizzard fixing them.
Yeah, I mean, Blizzard has done a lot of things that a union would do for us in terms of negotiating, like setting this contracts for with the organizations, right? So, you know, we signed the Overwatch League contract. It's like the first 28 pages are boilerplate, and they literally cannot be changed by you or the org. And that's a huge protection. It's protection on both sides, but really it's protection for the players because realistically, the players aren't going to be screwing the org over with a contract. So, I mean, there are some bad things in that contract, or maybe not bad things, but there's some things that, you know, that favor the orgs, or some things that favor the players. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that they cannot change that are really important protections for the players, like being actual employees and getting health insurance and kind of boring things, but things that are super, super important for your life and your career and for your stability, really. So the fact that Blizzard has given us all those protections, kind of, those were like the first things to fight for, I guess, if we made a union. So the fact that Blizzard has secured them on our behalf means that there's just less demand for unionization. I mean, maybe, I think the other challenge for a union is also the pace of esports, right? If you're going to have one union per game, then a game has to like last enough time for the union to kind of grow, because it takes time and the scene has to reach a certain point before it makes sense. So if the scene reaches that point and then the game dies like 5, 6, 7 years later, that feels like a long time, but from the perspective of a union is like not that much time. So if I go run the union and then it's like in 5 years, it's like, well, we're playing a new game now. It's like, well, I guess I'll go do something else. Not that that's a terrible thing, but it's just like a problem, I guess, that the unions would be connected to the life of the game, which is more limited than it is in traditional sports. I think maybe not. Maybe
that's what I think.
No one really knows, right?
It's much more complicated than I think anyone wants to give it credit for. It's a very, very complex issue, and I don't know how plausible some of it actually is. Go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say another thing would be like the idea of mental health people involved in esports is another big one that probably gets brought up on, right? And I've worked in mental health the last 4 years, and I worked in esports. And it brings up an interesting question, because you mentioned you're provided health insurance. At the point where you're provided health insurance, is it the org's responsibility to provide mental health?
I mean, legally, no, but, you know,
I mean, I hope
that's a different kind of responsibility.
Right?
It's a different kind of responsibility. Legally, the organization, as our employer, is required to provide health insurance. Under current legislation. They have to, like, you have to insure your employees, right? So that's why we have insurance, is that we are full-time employees, not independent contractors, as like every esports contract has made us in the past.
Yeah.
We're real employees now, which is a major, major game changer. It changes how you apply for an apartment. It changes how you, you know, like your credit check. It changes your insurance. It changes like your taxation. So it's a lot of things, and it generally, I think, although some things are good, some things are bad, but overall it's for the better that we're, you know, have that employee status.
Yeah,
it makes it much more difficult to just fire away for no reason, the way that it used to be in the past in esports, where you just get fired.
Yeah, I think esports has made huge trends in order to actually improve. I mean, Blizzard specifically, like some of the stuff that I've seen and heard about Blizzard compared to a lot of other scenes seems to be on an upward trajectory. So I have to ask you a question. What do you want to do with your life? Because right now the world literally seems to be your oyster. Like, you could cast if you want, it seems like. You could coach if you want, it seems like. You said you're going to be playing next year, so you're still a player. Like, it feels like literally any door. You could be an influencer. Every door is open to you. What are you passionate about? What drives you to continue making these changes?
I think if right now I feel like almost guilty for being passionate about the game. Like I know that I could do all these other things and like help esports players. Like I'm thinking, about the union. Who else is gonna actually do this thing besides me? If we actually if it's gonna happen, and if it's gonna happen in a decently timely fashion. But at the same time, I still feel like I'm there's like this time in my life when I can be a professional esports player, and if I go do something else right now, that time will come back. So my feeling is that I want to chase this dream of being a pro esports player until it doesn't make sense anymore. Whether that's because I decide I want to do something else, or I'm not as I don't want to practice enough, and I kind of lose that drive to be the best I still feel today. But I think for now, I want to keep playing and kind of make sure that I get the esports career that I know, like the player career that I know that I always dreamed of, I guess, and not be too quick to like jump into the next thing. But after I, kind of lose that passion, which I'm assuming will come someday, or maybe I'll just get aged out and there will be better young players, and that's how it goes, and I'm okay with that too. But when my career comes to a natural end, then I think I'll probably do some consulting, some casting. I mean, maybe the answer is just a little bit of everything. I'm kind of envisioning a career where I'm kind of working as esports talent to some extent, and then also working as a consultant, helping build the back end of the industry, as well as sort of working on the front end as talent as a player. I think it's really important also for other esports players to like see that you can do other things in esports, and that you don't just, and like that the knowledge and the skills that you gain as a player, and the experience you gain as a player, and the understanding of the gaming community, of the esports community, of the fans, and like you get so much knowledge and connections and experience as an esports player. I feel like a lot of players are just like thinking, oh, I guess I'll just stream when I'm done as a player or something. But I feel like the opportunities for players, not just me, are like way more broad than that. And that if you think about it, and if you like kind of try to cultivate it, that at the end of a successful player career, you can parlay that into a casting career. You can parlay that into a consulting career. Working with one of the developers, or an org, or coaching, or all these things, right? Like it's like you said for me, but I feel like that's something that almost anyone can do. Especially like casting. My experience with casting was that, in my opinion, if you're somebody who like plays in the Overwatch League and you call a lot for your team, you could also be a caster. Like I don't think there's any further qualification, because when I get into the game to cast, it's just like I'm calling for both teams is how I think of casting. It's very, very simple. I'm like, look, okay, so you have like, it's so much harder to do when you play the game, that if you can actually count ults for both teams, like if you can count enemy ults when you play Overwatch, and you're like calling for your team and saying, they've got beat and grab, and we're gonna do this to deal with that with our ults. The casting is like super easy. It's like a joke, right? Because you can just see all the ults, and you can see where all the players are, so you don't have to. It's like the easiest main calling of your life, right? You have wall hacks on everybody. You know where everyone is. So I think if anyone like I think a lot of players get intimidated by something like casting, like, well, I don't do that. But I really think that more players should think about, what are these other careers in gaming that I would want to do. In my opinion, streaming is kind of a grind, and I streamed for a while, but now I feel that I don't know, like I realized it wasn't making me happy, I guess, to stream. Like I wasn't feeling satisfied, or feeling like I was accomplishing something. I'm kind of thinking about ways to get back into it in a more sustainable way that doesn't kind of drain me. But recently, I've been really happy just focusing on my practice and just like getting back into that mode of being a pro player.
Yeah, I think that people always assume streaming is very easy, and I've seen people who stream. It is insane, especially it
This is
is.
a serious grind.
I could never do it, and this is someone who's worked very long days. I would rather continue back working in a jail where people are threatening my life than stream. Like
Yeah.
I cannot do it. I can't just sit there for hours and hours on end. And props to anyone who can, because
It's
like
hard to like entertain people, and for me, it's hard because I'm someone who a lot of people think is extroverted, but I'm personally feel very introverted. So it does feel very draining to like just kind of perform for people for that long. So I definitely have a lot of respect for anyone who can put out that kind of entertaining content for that long hours that you really need to do to grow your stream.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about like improving the scene. looking at like Blizzard, what are other improvements you would like to see them make?
I think a lot will depend on what the final schedule looks like for season 2 and season 3 going forward. I think there's the first key question for season 2 is how do you make the season a little more player friendly? And that seems weird, right? Because we do have like great jobs, and I just keep talking about how great everything is in our career. But the season is pretty horrible, and I think a lot of players would agree with that. That like it is an insane amount of like you don't get any breaks. You like 1 day off a week, which isn't really a day off because you still have to practice. So you it's like a day off, but you just don't have to like show up. So you just you basically get a 1 day weekend, and you got to keep practicing on that weekend. And then even in the week breaks between stages, almost every team has like media obligations and everything. So the way the season was structured last season and the way that teams have to operate with media obligations meant that you essentially had no real vacation for 4 to 5 months. And that's pretty grueling considering we're playing this game 70 hours a week. It's like you don't really want to do that for 5 months in a row. It's for sections, and then you get like a week off. It's like if you actually had a week off, that would make a huge difference. You can kind of reset mentally, but the pressure just kind of builds and it just reaches a peak, and there's really not any respite anywhere on that road. And I think maybe the experience of that will make a lot of players more ready for season 2, and maybe season 2 will just inherently be better because players are maybe more prepared for it, at least those who experienced season 1. But for the new players coming in, I would hope that they make the schedule maybe a little more palatable to players.
It sounds like they're doing like they're cutting a lot.
What I've heard, and I don't want to leak anything. So
no, they did an announcement.
Do you know what was in the public announcement? Because I know like a lot of the season, but
28 games over the course of the entire
that's
season.
Probably
You're gonna play either 0, 1 to 2 games a week.
Yeah, the bye weeks is a big one. I'm glad so I'm glad it's all public because I knew that stuff before. I didn't want to leak it, but that made me really excited, right? Because you actually get a bye week as like, I don't know, things like that. Even if you get 1 or 2 bye weeks in the season, just like a little bit of a breaks here and there, it makes a huge difference. Get that mental reset. I think it'll help the players. I think it'll increase the level of competition. You won't see as many 4-0s because one team's burned out.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate with you. Okay, because they give you breaks, but they do not say how teams have to utilize those breaks.
Yes.
Do you think, because they also generally, I wonder if they're going to change their patch schedule, because that was a big issue actually with the breaks, is you would have
the patch schedule is probably another thing they should. That's probably my biggest complaint is the patch schedule, realistically, because that was super annoying last season.
Because your options were you could take a break and you could mental reset, but you'd have less time for learning the patch. I think I would be very surprised if that was changing, because I think that there's a separation between their development and...
Yeah, I think they still refuse to patch for Overwatch League is my guess.
So, that being said, do you think teams that will abuse it?
Teams will abuse it, like more media and stuff, and just more...
Yeah, they'll take more media. They're going to give the same amount of time off. They're going to be like, listen, we need to learn this new patch. We have more time to learn this new patch, so we're going to be better prepared than so-and-so team, Outlaws, who decides to take a week off.
I mean, I don't think we're really going to be taking a week off, but it's more like taking 3 days off and then starting to practice again. Like, ooh, that's great. That's like music to my ears, actually getting a weekend. Like, I'm not asking for a week off in the middle of the season. I'm just asking for a couple days, here and there. And it really felt like that's what we were starved of last season. There's even more than 1 day where you just didn't have to be stressed out or didn't have to be thinking about something or watching some demos or practicing or, all the things that go into being a pro player, working with your team, solving issues. So I think that it's possible that teams could really, stack up the media obligations, but I don't think that just having a bigger break, it'll be more difficult for fill a bigger break entirely with obligations, right? I'm sure they will increase the obligations that are on breaks because the breaks are longer, and that's totally fair. And I don't even think a team is abusing their position by doing that. That's a fair decision by them. But I also think at the end of the day, it's going to result in maybe not, like, even if they're doubling the time off, it's not going to double the player time off, but it might increase it by 50%, and I'm happy with it.
Okay. So that's what I was wondering, because I know we heard stories about like Shanghai Dragons doing extremely long days, like 13. I don't know how much of that was actual playing or not, but I could definitely see teams next season doing a very similar thing with those days off. So
yeah, I mean, long playing hours and then media obligation. It's hard to say, but I still feel like it can't be as bad as last season, right?
You say that, you never... I don't think it will either. Realistically, I don't think it will be like... Last season was rough. Like, I remember doing that. I just remember being tired, like, all the time.
Yeah,
and you're like, okay, It might actually be beneficial that we take an extra day off this week, so that way maybe people have a little bit more of a time to reset. And I know that we did that occasionally.
Yeah, exactly. We did the same thing. We found that today, and this just enables that is the way I think the schedule change. It just enables that. And additionally, with like the 1-game weeks, there's a week where maybe you get a game early in the week and you don't have another game for 7 days or something, or 6 days.
Yeah.
And then there's no patch right then, and like you can definitely take a day off right there and then scrim for another 5 days before you play. Like the 6th day is not going to make you a better team. And that's a day off that you wouldn't have had last season. So
yeah,
or just even on a day off, you're still practicing, but it's just a day to like decompress. No one has to come in. You don't have to be stressed out. Another big thing, I think, at least for us, because we used their practice space last season, is just getting out of that practice space. That was pretty horrible, that tiny room. So we have like a better space now.
I heard they're making it bigger.
The practice spaces?
That's what I've heard. I don't know if
they're not providing them next season.
Oh, are they? Oh, well. Never mind. They're making them small.
Yeah, I think you get them on match days. It's like on match day, then you get a practice room in the thing. So I guess there's like 4 or 6 practice rooms, and maybe they're bringing them together. So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with the building, honestly. I have no idea.
It's a cool building, though.
I don't think that it will be the same situation, especially with the addition of 8 teams. They can't make all the rooms bigger and have 8 more of them. That's a little much from this building space that I've seen. So it's possible, but that would be a big building commitment. They're not going to keep expanding that room or that facility in LA when people are not going to be in LA in a couple. So
that's true. I'm really excited for the geolocation to see how that works out.
Yeah, exactly. That's gonna be fun.
Do you think that Blizzard should be more involved with their T2 scene?
Yes. I think that it's important to support the Tier 2 scene better and have it be a little bit. I don't know if I want to say more organized, because I do think it's like organized well. I just think that. Well, I guess the real challenge for the Tier 2 scene is that it's like they're not going to get the promotion stuff that the Overwatch League gets, because it's super important for the Overwatch League to be like the distinguished Overwatch brand. And from the Overwatch League and Blizzard's perspective, this is the investment that they like care about, that they're actually investing heavily in. Mm-hmm. They're not investing that heavily in contenders. But realistically, if you look at the Tier 2 scene in any esport, it's never good. Even like the only probably exception maybe is League of Legends, but even League of Legends, if you compare to like the LCS, is like ridiculous. It's like the same marginal difference. I mean, I think the reality is that esports is still at a point where if you're not at that top, whatever the top league is, or the top echelon of play, then the situation just radically, drops off in terms of your financial situation, your sustainability, your security in your career. All those things fall off a cliff as soon as you move down past the top tier. And that's maybe a problem for all of esports, more than I think Blizzard's T2 scene and specific Overwatch's T2 scene. That's like really something that esports has to figure out, because right now it's just like not sustainable until you are a pro. But if you look at professional sports, like traditional
I think it's
sports,
the same way,
it's pretty bad. I mean, it's not as bad as it is in esports, where like if you're in AAA, you're probably making 50K, like in AAA baseball or something, right? Like, or if you're in like one of the developmental leagues for the, like the NFL, or you're on like a practice team for an NFL team. Though you have to be very good at your sport to do that, like very good in the sense of general population. Like you're probably above the 99th percentile realistically. But those players that are in that 99th percentile, but 99.99 percentile are, I mean, that's a really small difference in terms of, the share of the population that you're better than. But in the reality of traditional sports is that you make almost nothing, and even not almost nothing, but you don't make like big sports money. Your body takes just as much punishment, maybe not as much, but still a lot of punishment. And you're basically making, average job money, right? Like not great money. I mean, it's not bad. It's definitely better than it is right now in the Tier 2 scene. But you're in a worse position, I think, if you're, in that AAA and that NFL practice squad than you would be if you were a minimum salary player in the Overwatch League.
Yeah.
Which I think is like it tells a lot about traditional sports. And if you even go up past that, it's like the stars are making these huge amounts of money. It's like eye-popping. Like, oh my God, LeBron James, $158 million contract. I don't know what LeBron James paid, but it's a lot of money. It's a lot of millions.
It's unfathomable amounts of
money.
It's
a huge amount of money. But if you just go down and you even look at the professional league in the NBA or something, and you look at like what are the lowest paid players making, or what is like the 25th percentile of player income, and it's not that it stops being as insane as you would think it would be. It's like you start realizing, okay, it's not everyone, it's really just like the top players. And that's kind of the nature of, I think, a competitive industry in a way where the very, very top performers are going to receive like a huge outsized amount of compensation because of the nature of the industry being so media driven, right? And, those really popular, really strong players are, I mean, maybe there's just something wrong with like human nature, but they seem in every esport to make just radically more money than the next. Then you go down the ladder. It doesn't scale is what I guess what I'm looking for. It doesn't scale accurately to what a player brings to a team. It really is. There's like a lot of bias in it. So I feel like, and I guess it's a really circuitous way of getting back to the question, what can Blizzard do more for the tier 2 scene? I think the biggest thing Blizzard should do for the tier 2 scene is fix matchmaking. So it's actually good and make role queue. Like if you don't make Overwatch itself, ranked Overwatch, a fundamentally competitive experience, then I think in the short term, 5, 6, 7 years. But if you want Overwatch to really last and to be one of those like Counter-Strike-esque games where it just goes through like graphical iteration after graphical iteration, where they're just like the game is so good and they just keep like you don't need to change it. You just kind of like keep doing it, right? The game is so compelling. You look at a game like Dota, right, that spawns all these other games, right? Just because the fundamental game is so compelling, controlling these heroes, fighting these other heroes, taking down the Nexus, the Ancient, whatever you want to call it, right? All these games kind of came from that one idea that was just so compelling. So if you want to make Overwatch a game like that, where it kind of becomes this standard setter, where it's like, wow, I mean, it is to some extent, right? Like I'm seeing all these games come.
Yeah.
It's like an old.
Oh, like you cut out there for a second.
Sorry, I was saying it looks like an Ultimate to me in Black Ops, right? Like all the shit that feels like it's kind of inspired by Overwatch in a lot of games. There's like more games coming out that are like Overwatch, but if Blizzard really wants that to be the case for the super long term, I think the number one thing they could do is put role queue in ranked, so that when you play ranked matchmaking, you're actually getting something that looks like the competitive experience as close as possible. That's really, I think, the way you fix tier 2. I don't think Blizzard can like make tier 2 players get paid more money or make the tournaments better, because I do feel like they do a decent job on just running the scene. As far as publicizing it, they could put it on the Battle.net client, but I don't think they will, beyond like the championships or whatever. I think the biggest thing they could do is fix ranked, so that there's actually like a clear way to prove yourself. But right now, being like top whatever on ranked is not that impressive. It's like people playing Symmetra only that are in the top whatever of rank, so you just know it doesn't really mean anything.
That is a little unfortunate that their rank system could be improved upon. So I have a very odd question for you. Did you know that there are romance novels based around you? That is what you've become. I kid you not. I ran across one where there was like fan fiction. Like, how does that make you feel? That is what you've come to. Like, you think about all these famous stars, and you have fan fiction. It's actually not bad. It's not bad.
You read it?
It wasn't like a graphic novel. Yes, I did read it. So, right. But I had to see if it was any good, the writing style, and I was like, it's... I don't think I would read it again, but I was like, what is this? What am I reading? Because it starts out kind of like being like a meeting interaction. I was like, someone describing getting to meet Jake. And I read it, and I'm like, what did I just read?
It's very interesting. I mean, I do think that it's just the nature of esports in the sense that a huge thing that makes esports different than other industries that are kind of similar is the amount of access that people have to the players and the stars. And like people streaming is like a huge amount of access. You can literally just ask somebody questions. There's a decent chance that they'll just answer them. But for me, as kind of like more of a, I don't know if to say private person. I'm not a very private person. Just, I don't know. I'm like kind of focused on what I'm doing. I'm like focused on being a pro player and casting and like that stuff for my career. And that's like what I think about. I don't really think about, like, I appreciate having the fan support. And when I go out to play a game, there's people cheering. That's like an amazing feeling. And it really actually, it matters to me. Like, makes me play better. It makes me really more happy about what I'm doing because I have so many people supporting me. So it is really meaningful. But on the flip side, I also feel like a little not sure what to do with it. You know, I'm like, well, like stuff like that, I guess, is just like, that's like, what do you, I don't know what to say about it. It's just like
You say thanks, and it's like
yeah,
that.
like you're like
Thank
that's
you.
extreme dedication. I don't know what to think about it, but it's definitely a dedicated fan for
It
sure.
is.
So
So
that it makes me happy that there's somebody who's really dedicated to me as a fan. Um, Writing fan fictions about me, it's like, yeah, I don't know, go wild, do your thing. Like,
So you mentioned like the access to esports, and some people have said that that's kind of a problem. That like some of the stuff that has happened to different individuals or players, has that been an issue for you? Like, have you had moments where it's been like, wow, this is scary actually?
not for me. I know some players have had that experience. I've never felt that way. The only times in my experience where maybe a fan has uh, overstepped or just been a little bit mistaken about what the relationship is between a fan and a player. At least for me, because I don't, I like would never date a fan as like a principal thing. I just think that's like,
It's a very weird power dynamic.
yeah. I don't want to have a power dynamic in a relationship. I think it's super important that you be equals with your partner, and that there not be this thing of like one person's more important or more powerful than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's super important to me. So that's why I wouldn't even consider it. But in my experience, the vast majority of fans are like super considerate, and they're more worried about overstepping their bounds, or doing something to make you feel uncomfortable than you are. So the fact that most fans are like so courteous and respectful of our boundaries and those type of things, that maybe there's some people who push beyond that, and that's definitely not a good thing. And hopefully those people don't, or it can sort of recognize maybe that they're stepping too far, can pick up the context clues that not everything is acceptable. But in my experience, it hasn't ever been like, I don't know, something that I was worried about. Just something that I try to be cognizant of, and I try to. But it's you're walking a fine line as a player, right? You don't want to like, rebuke somebody for doing something innocent. So you want to kind of be like, let someone down gently if they're over invested, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I mean, for some people, it's this really meaningful experience to be a fan of something, and it's kind of something that I was relating in my own life to the people that I'm like a big fan of. For instance, like I like to rock climb, so I follow Alex Honnold and all the stuff that he does with free soloing and climbing, and a few of these like top climbers I think of as like big role models for me. And if I ever got a chance to meet him, I'd be like, oh, like that's so amazing, I actually get to meet you. And I was kind of relating that to the experience I have with fans. I'm like, well, I could see why people feel this way, right? Like you see somebody doing something and you're like, that's awesome, and like, I want to cheer you on, and like you kind of like follow their accomplishments and they kind of inspire you. You're like, he did that, I'm gonna go out and do something. So I think for the negatives of fandom, of being too extreme on it, they're there, but there's a lot of positives that really seem to make a difference in somebody's life, and that is kind of one of the things that keeps me as an esports player and keeps me inspired to do what I do, because that you're doing that same service for other people, where they feel like, wow, like you're accomplishing a lot, and just that feeling for them is inspiring and makes them want to do better in their own life. And anything like that makes me really happy, right? The idea that you could affect other people in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. That's actually something that I've heard you mention before, that giving back is really important to you. So what have you done so far to try to give back? Because I know that's something that you said was really important to you. What are things that you want to do?
I did a charity stream for Hurricane Harvey, streaming, and I try and now my thinking about how to give back is focused heavily on how to like the things I'm doing for esports as a whole. I guess like the IOC stuff is the main version of it. But I really want to like better the experience for players, and to like make being an esports player, like continue that trend that Blizzard started, which is making being an esports player not a ridiculously stupid decision, which it was when I tried to do it. Right. And
I actually recommend most people don't all in on esports. I think you had a very wise idea of, hey, I'm going to go to school and see if I can make this work. Generally, that's what I recommend to most people.
I mean, that's how I recommend it, because it's super, super high risk. But what I want to do is maybe make it less high risk. Mm-hmm. And I think there's two ways to do that. And I think the first way is just growing esports so that there's more pro players, and the scene is bigger and the pie gets bigger, so everyone's slice is bigger too. Great, I'm happy. So anything I can do to like make esports bigger and more successful, that I want to do. I want to bring that success to our industry, because I believe it has the potential to like just change entertainment. to become one of the dominant, pieces of the entertainment landscape. If it continues to grow like this, it certainly will be. But the flip side of that, I think, is to also do things that show to esports players, and especially, maybe even more especially than people who are actually esports players, people who are aspiring to be professional esports players. I want to show those people that if you have this intense passion for gaming and esports, that I don't think that you'll be totally unfulfilled by doing a position in esports that isn't being a pro player, right? Like, if there are all these positions, like being like from being an observer to being an analyst, to being a coach, to working with teams, to working with players, working with the league, there's way more people doing those kinds of jobs than there are professional players. And I think a big message I want to send to a lot of people who are growing up, like young people growing up gaming, is that if you're really passionate about gaming and you're really passionate about sports, you shouldn't feel like the way I felt, which was the only thing that would make me happy is being an esports player. But rather, you should realize, look at all these, like, this amazing industry that's growing, and just like working in the industry and supporting the industry could be really amazing and fulfilling too. And I've been having that sensation while casting, that I'm like, it's so cool to make the broadcast and kind of like, because at the end of the day, the players, the casters, the observers, everyone making the show run, we're all just building this broadcast product together. So being a part of that, whether you're working with players, working with the broadcast, working with the orgs or the league, can also be really fulfilling. So I kind of want to show to people that it isn't all about being, you don't have to be the NFL stuff, right? You can like get a lot of that. You can still be passionate about what you're doing and find something that's really fulfilling and makes you happy, that isn't like a 1 in a million shot, that there's like more of a concrete path towards. So basically encouraging people to like stay in school and build their skills, and when they're ready, come into the industry and work in the industry and find success in the industry, even if they're not a pro player.
You wrote a really, I like about your idea of getting back and helping. I think it's a really good way to actually improve the scene and grow it, and as well to give back to people, and it gives different people an outlook to look forward to. You wrote a piece on women in esports, which is, I think, generally most people consider very, not your piece specifically, but the idea of it, very controversial. I was wondering if I could get your thoughts on that.
Sure. What do you think is controversial about it?
I think that some people don't like to, not necessarily piece, but some people don't like the idea of talking about a subject and where people's opinions lie one way or another. Like, is it something that is fueled by the number of people who are playing? Like, could it be that there's a disparity between the amount of women, or is it just that women are not given a fair chance in esports?
Yeah. I mean, I think my piece was, I liked writing that piece because I didn't feel like I feel like it's such a complex issue. If you look at, the experience of women in modern society, it's such a difficult issue to put a pin on. And I think that's maybe what makes it so controversial, because any issue that affects like whatever huge percentage of the population, it basically half the population. So some maybe close to that, people who identify as women, it's just always going to be radically complex and always going to be defying a simple solution. That's like, well, this is why that happened. Yeah. It's like, you're talking about quite literally billions of people's lives. So for me, what I wanted to do with the piece was just maybe turn a mirror on the esports community and say, well, why is it this way, right? Because now we have Gregory in the Overwatch League, and I mean, she's probably not the best off tank, but she's definitely not the worst off tank. She's definitely like a competitive player. I mean, anyone who thinks that like women can't compete in esports is wrong. Like it's not true. Like she can compete, right? So why not anybody else? And I think that unless you really believe that like women are like slower or stupider than men, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for esports, to be honest. Yeah, like I hope you don't believe that, no. But whatever. So unless you really think those things, some people do. Yeah. Some people have those really deeply rooted sexist opinions, and like whatever. But if you don't think that, then why aren't there more women in esports, right? Like you have to ask that question, because there's only one in the Overwatch League and most leagues have 0, right? So I just think the question why is really interesting, right? It's like you wouldn't, if you accept that women are equally abled as men on average, and then why do men flock to esports, and why are there so few women in it, in the top level competitive scene at least? I think that it's just like a question worth asking, considering it's not what I would expect maybe. So that's why I looked at like the demographic issue and like social issue. There's a whole bunch of reasons why. And the reality is probably a mix of all of them, is what I kind of think. My own personal conclusion is. But I think that piece kind of, my point was just to leave it up to the reader. I was like, well, what do you like? Well, how do you experience the community being toxic against women? I mean, I certainly do. And what about the demographic issue? I still think the demographic issue is like the primary one, or I hope it is, because it's the one that will be just naturally solved by the passage of time as gaming becomes more mainstream. I think it's growing among women radically faster than it's growing among men.
Yeah, I would agree with
because
that.
It's already so saturated in the male market that now more women getting into it is like a huge game changer. And companies are going to realize we got to make more games that like aren't just marketed to boys, right? That are marketed to women and girls as well. So I think that the demographic issue will be solved over time, and hopefully that'll lead to more parity. But I do think it's kind of undeniable that there's a bit of a social problem here, right? That, I mean, I guess maybe it's just that esports is a very male space because it has been a male space for so long. So there's an element of path dependence. And then if you're to be the first girl or the second girl or woman entering this super male space is like really difficult, right? And something that I think is important to recognize, that even if the community isn't hateful or toxic, and I think at the highest level that is true, that most players don't really care. Like maybe some do, some are like, I don't know, probably some players still do, just
probably,
but me and my team, I mean, we've talked about like, we don't give a shit, like you play the game good, like let's go, like game. So I mean, I think the challenge though is that below that highest level where people are super focused on performance and don't really care about other factors, then that's where it's much more difficult to be a woman, right? Where when people are just like down in the trenches, I mean, which is something that every esports player survived, is like, just like grinding their way up the ladder. It's much more difficult. And I have experienced many times women speaking on the mic before being harassed by a teammate, right? So it's like, it's there, even if you're a guy and you don't see it all the time because you're not actually a target of it, it's definitely there. So that's just something that I think the community kind of has to come to terms with on its own. And I think that'll happen kind of in tandem with the demographic effect. People will be like, hopefully more women continue to come to gaming and people actually just get over themselves and, realize that this isn't just like for boys, right? That's just like a ridiculous idea that you would gender separate any popular activity.
Yeah, I think it's also important that people actually are open with talking about it. Like, I think a lot of people are really scared to give their viewpoints because of the way people react. But I think if we don't have discussion and actually work through things, I don't know if it'll ever change. Like, I think eventually maybe it will over time, but it'll be significantly longer than if we could actually have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's super important, especially right now in the community. Like, given that there are so few women at the professional community, and we are models for the aspiring professional community, for people trying to like come up in the scene, they're going to be looking to people who are currently in the professional scene, right? So I think it's really important for Overwatch League players, especially, to talk about this issue, right? Because I think, you'd be hard pressed to find an Overwatch League player who's like actively harassing women who are in the game, right? I think like most players are like way far beyond that in terms of just like, that's so wrong on so many levels, as a professional, as a human being, whatever. But to continue to expand that idea and to talk about it, I guess, like you're saying, it's just important to keep it in the public eye, so that the next time someone who looks up to me is in a game, that they hopefully, I would really hope, does not single out women on their team for harassment based on play, right? That's the biggest thing I've experienced, is just that like sometimes I play bad, generally people don't harass me, but when a girl has a bad round and she talks on the mic, or girl on my team, right? So it's still like this pervasive ideology that girls can't play video games. And I think that, I don't know how pervasive it is, but it's definitely there, it's present. And I think any girl I've talked to is like, yeah, if I talk on the mic, people are going to harass me. It's like, it's just terrible to me that that's the reality, right? That most, at least that I know, most girl gamers that I know, they don't give a shit anymore because they're like, fuck it, right? Like, I'm playing games and I'm used to it. But I don't think they should have to.
I was just going to say, I don't think they should be.
They should have to. I think they should just be able to play games and not be targeted for harassment. And part of it is the online anonymous thing. Part of it is that gaming is a space for a lot of people who are, who consider themselves like loners or exiles from outside society. It can kind of gather and be accepted. But I would encourage people to really think about the thing that they like so much about gaming, that space for them. And it's like kind of they can just get on the computer and maybe escape their troubles. So you make that a space for everybody to do that same thing. Girls, guys, any gender identity.
Yeah. So you mentioned them kind of taking that loner aspect, and I don't think you were ever like them, but I know you mentioned one time that you kind of were a loner and didn't fit in, and I mentioned that was mostly probably through high school.
Yeah.
Well,
mostly it was like the end of high school. Actually, it was weird. It's like later, I was always friends with, like, the people in the older classes.
Mm-hmm.
So most of my friends were like 2 years older than me, and I had some friends 1 year older than me, and I didn't really know. I wasn't like friends with a huge amount of people in my grade itself. So that was mostly my last year of high school, which I remember the most clearly. I was just like, yeah, sucks. All my friends graduated. But throughout the high school, I don't know. I was just a kid who wanted to go home at the end of the day and play video games all day. So, you know, I wasn't going to parties, you know, I wasn't like the popular, I wasn't playing like team sports. So I think once you kind of opt out of those things in high school, you end up on a different social track. Not necessarily a bad one.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's bad. One thing that I've noticed with a lot of esports players is that they actually tend to focus a lot more on games than their social connections. It doesn't sound like you were able to really do that.
I mean, I still think I focused on games, but I definitely like time for other stuff. And that is kind of going back to my, like, them. They always encourage me to have a balanced lifestyle. And I think that even though I was really into gaming, which is not the thing they wanted me to focus on, they wanted me to have a different focus. But at the same time, I still internalize that message of your focus isn't myopic. It's just your focus, right? It's like, well, maybe this is like the thing I really want to do. So after I finish my coursework, I'm going to like go back and practice Overwatch for 8 hours so I can be a pro Overwatch player someday, you know? And I mean, that my parents certainly weren't happy about that. But even though I was still feeling that and like investing so much of my time into becoming a pro Overwatch player and making a huge amount of like really impactful life decisions that encourage that, that I was still trying to make time for, you know, like, you know, hanging out with my friends and doing extracurriculars and rock climbing, you know, like kind of just living a balanced lifestyle. And I kind of feel like that has helped me a lot in being a pro gamer and staying healthy and staying happy.
Brings up another question. So you think that fitness is very healthy, and I agree with you. I think that people should be fit. I think people in esports should work on their own personal health a lot, whether that's mental health or physical health. Do you think that fitness should be something that's forced?
No, I don't think that forcing is a good idea because it makes people like resist it, and it just makes this like weird dynamic where someone doesn't want to do it and someone doesn't want to like work out or whatever. You can't like force them to work out. But what I would really encourage is a lot of people have this idea that if you don't, like, you just like either you go to the gym or you don't go to the gym. And for me, like, I don't really like going to the gym. I still go to the gym sometimes, but it's not like some people feel passionate about going to the gym. I do not feel passionate about going to the gym. I go to the gym because I'm supposed to go to the gym. But if you don't like that, there's so many other ways to stay fit and active that you don't need to go lift weights, you know? Like I just, that's one bad thing is like, I don't know, I like to do yoga, I like to rock climb because I find these activities a lot more engaging and like holistic than going to the gym and picking up heavy stuff and putting it down again. And like that, I just think that almost everyone can find some activity that is physically active that they enjoy. Whether they go take a hike, you know, like find like a hiking trail near you and go like take a hike, and then, or just take a walk, like literally just get out and, you know, walk down the street a mile and walk back. And it's like, you actually feel pretty good after doing that. You know, you don't have to be on some crazy fitness crowd. You don't have to rock climb. You don't have to do yoga. You don't have to do any of these things. You just try to find something in your life that is very different than gaming. Like, use your body in a way that you don't use it the same way you all day 24/7 sitting in a chair playing video games. Just use your body in a different way, whatever that is. Like, just find anything, you know. And like, I literally just walking, fuck man, just take the stairs instead of the elevator, you know. It's just about these like very little small changes you make in your life to optimize. And at the end of the day, exercise is really something like, you know, what, 20-25% of your fitness, maybe probably less realistically. Yeah. The much more important thing is your diet. So eating well is like radically more important, I think, to being fit and healthy than exercises. I mean, you should exercise, and it's important, especially because of our jobs making us sit in a chair all day. But it really, if you eat well and you even just like walk enough in a day, you'll probably be fine, in my opinion. But you just need it's just important not to remember that we're like really young right now, and our bodies are able to take a huge amount of stress without very much
Speak for yourself
care.
on the really young.
Yeah, but I mean, for esports players, you know, like a lot, like almost like I'm like probably above the average age or something too, right? The average age is probably like what, 19, 20. So, I mean, the reality is at our age, we don't really have to do any of this stuff and we'll be fine. But if you give it like 3, 4, 5 years, you're gonna realize.
Yeah, you're gonna be like me 3, 4, 5 years. I'm 20.
Well, that's what I mean. It's not a whole lot of time.
Oh,
it's like
you
do need to actually take care of yourself and like. So that's for your career's longevity. If you want to keep being an esports player for a long time, you don't want to be getting RSI when you're 18. Like that's terrifying. There's players who are 18 years old. I think like Birdring had to like miss matches because he had like carpal tunnel. I was like, what?
Yeah.
He's like 19, 18 or something, right? He's really young, and that's scary to me. So that's why that kind of like kicked me into high gear on wanting to like stay fit and exercise. It's just, I mean, even if you just like being an esports player, if you want to keep doing that, it's important like that your body continues to function, right? And if you're getting repetitive stress injury because you don't do anything else with your hands besides use the mouse, right? Like if you don't have some other activity to kind of balance you out, it's really easy to get those type of injuries, even when you're really young. So it's just important for people to consider that it's not even just about this like super abstract idea of like living longer. Like when you're 80, you'll feel better because you worked out when you're 20. It's like, that's kind of abstract and hard to consider. Probably true, but also abstract and hard to consider. But if you just think about the near term, just like feeling better and having a longer player career, I mean, those things are important. So that's why your health is important, really.
Yeah, I agree. So Outlaw Season 1, it was obviously probably very emotional. You probably had to learn to deal with... Yeah, roller coaster. I think to be honest, I think all of Owl was roller coaster for everyone. Yeah, I don't think it was just...
anyone who survived Overwatch League Season 1, that's what I gotta say.
Yeah. How did you handle... I think a lot of people had a really hard time handling emotions. I think we saw it throughout the league. We saw different people have different breakdowns. We had coaches who stepped down, different teams. What was that like for you? What was the emotional roller coaster that you kind of went through? And what were like your moments?
It was definitely an emotional roller coaster, but yeah, I guess like the biggest thing is just learning to deal with losing and just accepting it. Not accepting in the sense that you're like okay with it, but just accepting it in the sense that you have to like go into you have 2 matches a week. Like if you lose match 1, you can't just like be tilted and lose match 2 because you're so upset at yourself. So you have to strike the balance. And I think a lot of esports players come from this place of like I have to like become better. I have to like make it as a pro player. And there's so much pressure that you put on yourself that when you lose, it's almost like unacceptable. And I mean, for me, I get like super upset, and I couldn't deal with the emotion at the beginning.
So when you were getting like super upset, was it like I'm breaking down and crying? Did you have those moments?
I think I cried like once or twice in the Overwatch League season, but it was more like just feeling super stressed out all the time, or being angry at myself, or feeling really disappointed. I felt really most of all disappointed in myself, I think. And just like I would play, like especially stage 2 and I was like learning Tracer. I never played before. I just felt like I was losing the games for my team, and it was like my fault that we lost games. And that was like a really tough feeling for me. But it really also was good in a sense because it made me super motivated, and I like played like I think on my Smurf. When I look back on my Smurf, like all the seasons of competitive where I was playing Tracer, I had like 30 hours of Tracer only on that account on ranked season. And I was like, it made me really want to get better, even at this thing that I'm like not a natural at and is like not my style of character in FPS games, and I had never really played before. But it made me like really motivated to improve, even though it was a bad situation. So, but I think in the long run, by the end of the season, the more important development really was that I was able to like take a loss and kind of just look at it analytically and be like, okay, look, I definitely made some mistakes. Maybe this actually wasn't a terrible game for me. Like I did some things right, like, so what can I look at to do again? What can I look at to change? And just kind of making it more of an analytical process than an emotional process. So I'm not like, we lost. It's like, well, we went 3-2 and on the maps we lost and maps we won, right? There's like, I can rewatch those and say, and here's the points for me to improve on. And once I started looking at it like that, where I was really focused on just like the nuts and bolts of it, of like, okay, I shouldn't have pushed there. That probably lost us this round. It's like, instead of being super emotional, oh my God, this mistake, I cost us the game. I'm such a bad player. I'm such a bad person, which is kind of how I felt in the beginning. I was like, this is all my fault and whatever. You just kind of stop focusing on that and you start focusing on the productive thing, which is, okay, next time, what am I doing here? Like, should I have picked a different character? Should I have played the character differently? Should I have made a call for my teammate? you know, like what are the things I can improve on? And once I started looking at matches like that, the same way I look at casual practice of just like, how do I improve on this? It kind of takes the edge off some of the emotion, and you're just like, you can kind of see things more clearly. And I think that hopefully, I think for the Overwatch League is a huge experience for that. So I think all the players coming into it this season will probably have a similar experience, because it is a really, really intense environment. It is a really high pressure environment. But at the same time, if you can deal with that, then it can be like one of the most fun environments ever. So there's nothing positive and negative, right? Because for every like super low, right, where I was super upset.
I was just gonna ask what's super high.
There were times when you won this game that we were like the underdog, you know what I mean, right? And we won a lot of games we're not supposed to win. We lost a lot of games we're not supposed to lose. No, I guess you're not supposed to lose any game. But so of course,
I think that like we don't get to see that a lot of times. I think a lot of time, like, because human beings, I think generally are empathetic. I'm going to say generally empathetic.
Generally. I mean, some people don't have empathy. Empathy is just a amygdala being connected to your frontal lobe, and some people don't have that connection. We think of those people as bad people, but really that's just something that you can't control, that you're born with. So,
so generally people are empathetic, and a lot of times we don't get to see those hard moments because it makes us feel sad, and I don't think a lot of people want others to feel sad. So a lot of times you get the highlights of like, these are all the good moments we have, but I don't think people realize how stressful Overwatch was for the first season, how stressful being in esports is, no matter where you are, whether or not you're a caster or someone else. I think it's stressful for everyone.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to show that. I also do think the good moments are important too.
I mean, the good moments are great, and I think they're not even. It's like the intensity of emotion is always going to be matched, right? Yeah. Like if your wins are incredibly meaningful and huge memorable experiences in your life, then so are probably your losses in the opposite way. And I don't know if there's any solution for that really at all, but it's just, I think it's important as a player to be able to, just for the success of your team, to like not allow a loss to define you as a person. And a win is like, great, you know, wins are different because it's just like, yeah, just enjoy it and like fun, right? And just like get the most out of it. But for losses, you need to move on. And like the process of moving on is, for me, a very like, you just got to do some stuff. You know, you got to like watch the game over, even if it's painful, and you got owned, and see how you got owned, and don't let it happen again.
And I think that's true for a lot of life too, though. Like people
really
have bad things that happen to, and it's kind of one of the things I want to draw on is, even if you're not in Overwatch League, if you're someone else and you have something bad that happens to you, you need to find ways to move on and look at a situation to improve.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I think that process has kind of been this way. If something goes wrong, I'm always thinking about, all right, well, let's just not make a mistake again. Like I don't really get upset when things go wrong. I just get upset if things go wrong the same way multiple times and I could have fixed it. That's when I would get upset. Or that someone else could have fixed it. I'm like, we got to improve. Like that's always my thing is like, I'm never mad at somebody if they make a mistake, but I would be upset if people didn't take any steps to like change anything, and there's like a predictable mistake that will occur again. Mm-hmm. Then I'm like, that would be the one thing that I don't like. So if I'm like, in life you have some right, but if you just like, you know, like I take this one example. It was pretty funny when I was like a teenager. I was in this guy rear-ended me and my mom were driving. I was driving the car, and I was a pretty new driver at the time, so I was kind of, you know, whatever, like, you know, anyone who's driving for like a year, you're not like super comfortable, sure of yourself. But I got rear-ended on the freeway. It was pretty, you know, stop and go traffic. I got rear-ended, which in California is like always their fault if they rear-end you, basically. It's just like I stopped, you know, didn't hit the guy in front of me. He didn't do the same. So the guy gets out and he's like yelling. He's like, "Oh, stupid kid!" And I remember it was funny. That's kind of like a defining moment in my life because I was very calm. I was like, "Are you okay, man?" And he's like, "Yeah, fine, whatever." You know, and I was just like, "Well, it's like no big deal, right? Like you know, it happened, whatever. You just got to move on. You know, like." Call the insurance, we'll get the car fixed. It wasn't like a major car wreck, right? Maybe if it was worse, I would have been upset, but still, just like once something goes wrong, you know, like don't cry over spilled milk and just like move on. Like what can you do to fix it? You know, like what can you do to, and you may not fix it, maybe something happened in your life tractable that can never be replaced, you know, but what can you do to you know, find something positive out of it? You know, even a very negative, horrible thing can, you know, it's not like you should feel like you have to wallow in it, or you feel like you have to, you know, do the proper amount of being upset, right? It's like, well, what if you just, you know, think about the positive things, and what if you just not to be some sort of idol, like, oh, it's fine, everything's okay, but just like, is there a way that you can learn from something? Is there a way you can grow from something, experience something in a way that gives you a small benefit, even if it's in contrast with a large negative.
Yeah, I can relate totally because I stuck my hand in a snowblower and chopped off fingers. And I know that I think I had a very similar defining moment where I was like, I could just keep letting this. I'm like, dude, no one's gonna ever like me because I have these weird looking fingers now. Or I can figure out a way to move on with it. And I used to always joke about it because I can knock on doors with like one finger, and it's like, that's my thing now. It's like, okay, I can enjoy this. I can find some way. I can still play guitar. Well, it's
Yeah,
good. Like finding a way to move on, I think is
you
really
realize
good.
all the things you do still have, even though you lost something. It's not. Turns out that that thing wasn't as important as you thought it was, because humans are super adaptable, and that's one of the coolest things about being a human is that you can adapt and like change who you are. Really, like maybe you're an angry person, and that's actually something you can fix. I mean, to some extent, right? Like some people are genetically predisposed to be more irritable or whatever, but you can change anything in your life. If you sometimes like, there's been times in my life when I've realized, I like I used to. I mean, like when it comes to something I'm interested in, I'd always like, oh, let's talk about it. But I realized I had a bad habit of monopolizing conversations, and I've been trying to like fix that about myself and like change my personality so that I make sure that I'm like, listening to other people when they speak, and I realized I wasn't doing that well enough because my family was like we were very loud talkers. Everyone was talking a lot in my family. That was the norm, right? Everyone kind of fighting for conversational space. So I got used to that, and then I realized I was too aggressive about it when I was just with other people. So it's one of the cool things about being a human that from on every level, from the physical to your personality, you can kind of affect yourself and be better always.
Yeah, and you know what? With that, I think this is a perfect spot to end this episode. You can be a better person. Do you have any shout outs that you want to give to people?
Um, not really, no shout outs, I guess. I always feel weird in the shout out
That's
section.
I always ask just because people feel awkward if I don't ask and I just say it's over with. So I figured I'd ask you.
Yeah. Well, my shout out to the fans. Keep it real, yo.
Okay, that's it, guys. Till next time. I want to thank you for making it to the end of this video. I know that this content is a longer format specifically to showcase a more emotional side of people involved in esports. I think it's really important that we stay empathetic and show support to all of my guests that are willing to come onto the show. Sometimes they share some very heartfelt things that they've never shared with anyone else before. I think it's important that they understand that we support them and that this is a safe experience to do. This will show others that coming on the show is something that they can also do in order to share with all of us so we better understand esports as a whole and the people who are involved in it. Finally, if you enjoy this content as much as I do making it, I would encourage you to check out my Patreon that I have created. This will help you to support equipment upgrades, future content, exclusive content, and my general ability to drink an overabundant amount of coffee. And make sure to include some tiers that allow you to support this channel and give rewards anywhere from receiving my content early to being able to know the guest early and submit questions for exclusive videos. So I hope you check it out. I hope you have a wonderful day.